Hello YouTube. Today my video will be on how to grow Dwarf Baby Tears. The concepts covered in this video will also be applicable to growing other types of ground cover or carpet plants. Dwarf Baby Tears are actually pretty predictable plants and they are quite easy to grow as long as a few basic concepts are followed. These are the four main factors that will influence the success of the HC carpet in ascending order from easiest to most difficult to control: temperature, light, planting technique, and CO2. Dwarf Baby Tears, just like most aquatic plants, can actually survive in a huge range of temperature. The sweet spot is somewhere between 20 degrees Celsius and 24 degrees Celsius. At colder temperatures, the HC will just grow a bit more slowly, but they'll still survive. At hotter temperatures towards 30 degrees, you can still have nice carpets. However, growth may not be as dense or as full, and you'll face other problems that I'll describe in the later part of the video. Most of the HC carpets you see in my videos are grown in temperatures around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. The next factor is sometimes greatly exaggerated by aquarists, that HC needs a ton of light to grow. It grows well with just a medium amount of lighting. It will grow faster with higher lighting, but it is not necessary. In the recent casescape that I finished, the whole HC carpet was grown using 2 IKEA desk lamps, the total cost being about $20. So really expensive lighting is not necessary to grow carpet plants. You just need to make sure that they are not obstructed or shaded by other stem plants that you plant beside them. Next is planting technique. I would recommend breaking up bigger pieces of HC into smaller strains between 3 to 5 strands each before planting. Using smaller strands allow each clump to get better access to lighting and flow, and allows them more space to spread as well. It also allows you to see the growth of individual strands more clearly and detect problems early. The next factor for success with HC, and also the most important one, is good CO2 control. Looking through hundreds of examples on forums with people having problems with their HC carpet, a full 90 to 95% of them cannot grow HC because of poor CO2 control. This problem is exaggerated in warm tanks. If we compare two tanks, one at 20 degrees Celsius and another one at 30 degrees Celsius, plant metabolism in the warmer tank is double that of the tank at 20 degrees Celsius, and yet CO2 is harder to dissolve in warmer water. For folks living in the temperate countries that badly want a HC carpet and have no livestock to consider about, perhaps the easiest method is to try growing it at 20 degrees instead of the warmer water. For those of us in the tropics, any method you can use to cool down the water, whether by using fans or having it in an air-conditioned room, will make growing HC that much easier. Every degree matters. To get a good HC carpet going, the most important part is spotting CO2 deficiency early, to be able to identify the key signs that the plant needs more CO2 in order to spread. There are two key characteristics to identifying HC that is CO2 deficient. The first is that the stems do not creep but start to point upwards. The second is that the leaves become incrementally smaller, with the growth tip having the smallest leaves compared to the old growth. At this point, the most common question I get asked by everyone is, how do you know it is not a nutrient deficiency? How do you know it is a CO2 deficiency? By far the easiest method is by comparing the other plants in the tank to the HC carpet. If you have stem plants in the tank, they have much better access to light flow as well as CO2 in the water column. Stem plants that have access to the middle of the water column probably have upwards of double the light as well as access to CO2 that carpet plants get. So if your stem plants are not showing any signs of nutrient deficiencies at all, then it is extremely unlikely that the carpet plants with their smaller mass and access to the nutrient-rich substrate are nutrient deficient. Nutrient deficiencies are the result of growth, not the result of non-growth. So if you have a HC carpet that is not spreading in the first place, it is very unlikely that it is due to the lack of nutrients. After all, 40% of all plant mass is carbon, as stated in the CO2 video. Thus, the nutrient that is most likely to be deficient in most plants is actually carbon. Diagnosing nutrient deficiencies is not as easy as comparing the picture of your plant to some diagram on the internet that shows yellowing leaves. Because carbon is so important for plant growth, a lack of CO2 will manifest itself in many forms of poor growth, and these are often misdiagnosed for nutrient deficiencies when it is in fact a CO2 deficiency. The next common comment I get is, but my job checker is green. The CO2 job checker can remain green over a large range of CO2 values. It's like using training wheels on a bicycle. It keeps you safe, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. Learning to read plant and fish response to CO2 levels is a much more accurate method to tune CO2. Since identifying CO2 deficiency in HC is such a key success factor, I will go through the various stages of improving CO2 conditions and the corresponding form that HC will take. At very poor levels, there will be hardly any growth even after a few weeks, and most of the stems will be upright, with leaves gradually getting smaller and smaller. At better CO2 levels, the HC will grow, but again most of the growth is vertical rather than horizontal, and the leaves will be healthy but they will be small. In these borderline cases, you can get a carpet that looks decent by continual pruning. However, it won't be as dense or ideal as if better conditions were provided. This is sparse growth, but this is not too bad. Most of the leaves are large than healthy, and most of the growth is creeping. This carpet will grow to be nice and dense in time to come. However, the length between the internodes is still slightly further apart. It can be denser if better conditions were provided. This is a picture of what ideal growth looks like. The growth is entirely flattened against the substrate. The leaves are large and thick and closely spaced on the stem. I think that the last two pictures are the ones that will give really nice carpets. The longer that the HC has been growing in a CO2 deficient state, the less energy the plant has and the longer it will take to turn around. So the key to getting a successful HC carpet is to recognize the symptoms of CO2 deficiency early and adjust either the flow or the injection rate of CO2 to compensate. I planted this batch of HC about 4 days ago, and when I planted them they were mostly vertical, but by now you can see them starting to lie against the substrate and creep, and there's some pearling as well. If the HC reaches this stage within a week, then you are in good hands. However, if within a week the stems are still standing vertical, then you should consider tweaking the CO2 levels or improving flow to the area. The last part of my video is on trimming. HC is pretty easy to trim actually. Just mow down the carpet at regular intervals. Once in a long while, it is good to trim the HC extremely deeply, right down to the substrate level, and then let things regrow from there. Deep trimming and allow new growth to attach to the substrate will prevent a thick carpet from uplifting in the long run. For those of you wondering how to improve your CO2 levels in the planter tank, I have a separate video for that as well. With that, I have come to the end of my video and wish you guys all the luck with growing your carpets. After you have mastered growing HC, dwarf hairgrass as well as glosso, the easier carpets, will be a breeze by comparison.